welcome to the Deep Dive.
Hey there.
Today we are doing exactly that, diving deep into one specific view on the new Marvel film, Thunderbolts.
Yeah, we're looking at a review from Moviescramble. It's by Thomas Simpson, and it came out May 1st, 2025.
Right, that's our source material. And our mission, well, it's pretty straightforward. We want to unpack this reviewer's take.
How Simpson saw the movie fitting into the whole MCU landscape right now.
What he thought it got right, and maybe more importantly, where he felt it went wrong.
We're aiming to pull out the key insights from his specific perspective so you get a solid understanding of one critic's reaction,
Exactly, both on the movie itself and what it might mean for the bigger franchise picture, at least according to Simpson.
Okay, so where does he start? He kind of sets the scene first, talking about the MCU after Endgame.
Yeah, he does. He suggests it's been a bit of a struggle for Marvel to find its footing since 2019.
That's his assessment. He talks about the continuity, right? How it's pushing nearly 2 decades now.
And how keeping up used to feel like, a bonus for dedicated fans.
But now, he argues it almost punishes people who haven't seen everything.
Yeah.
Like, you need to do homework.
Yeah, that homework idea, it's a lot to keep track of.
Definitely. And he feels the path towards the next big crossover event feels, well, inconsistent.
Making the whole expanded universe kind of hard to follow right now, in his view.
Exactly. So that's the backdrop he paints before even getting to Thunderbolts.
Okay, so then he turns to this movie, and he actually saw some real potential there, didn't he?
He did. He called it a possible breath of fresh air, which is interesting given his views on the current MCU state.
What was the promise he saw?
Well, he highlights the idea of bringing back familiar faces, some very familiar, maybe some less so.
But from a different angle, he says.
Yeah, not just, the usual heroes. These were meant to be reluctant misfits forced to band together.
Right, the classic reluctant team-up. Save the world, maybe learn something along the way.
That was the core idea he picked up on.
And according to Simpson, for a decent chunk of the film, it actually delivers on that.
Yeah, he says it follows that idea for the first half, and that at least 2/3 of the movie is genuinely a lot of fun.
Okay, so what specifically worked for him in that fun part?
He puts a big emphasis on the cast. Says they have great chemistry together.
Guess he singles out some performances too, right?
Oh, yeah. Florence Pugh as Yelena and Wyatt Russell as John Walker. He says they bring nuance and depth.
Exploring their inner turmoil, their dark pasts riddled with regrets, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Though he does add a little note about Walker.
Oh, what's that?
He sort of suggests that your connection to Walker might depend on how well you remember his Disney Plus show.
Ah, right. Watched 4 years ago during lockdown, as he puts it. Memories fade.
Precisely. But with Yelena, he feels Q gets more screen time, and her performance really pulls you in.
He calls her the emotional heartbeat of the movie.
Yeah, that's the phrase he uses. High praise for Pugh.
What about the villain, the Sentry, played by Louis Pullman?
He actually liked Pullman's portrayal quite a bit, calls him a memorable foe for the right reasons.
Okay.
He even contrasts it very briefly with what he calls Cara Delevingne's questionable performance back in the 2016 Suicide Squad.
Ah, I'm drawing that comparison again. So, Pullman's Sentry.
Simpson describes him as likable and menacing all at once. Someone fighting his own demons, but, taking it out on the world.
Interesting dynamic. And what about the action early on?
He liked that too, because the opening set pieces show the team at their best.
Meaning?
Fighting tough odds, but against enemies they can actually beat. It forces them to be smart when they're outnumbered.
Which leads to
exciting action sequences that ground the movie, in his words. So strong start, grounded action, good character work.
Okay, so it sounds like he was pretty positive about a good portion of it.
Definitely the first 2/3, yeah.
But then the stumble, where does he think it goes wrong?
This is his main point, really. He says the movie fails to learn an important lesson from 2016's Suicide Squad.
Okay, that comparison again. What's the lesson they supposedly missed?
It's about the villain choice. Pitting a team of, as he calls them, underpowered individuals.
Like the Thunderbolts, based on that earlier grounded action he liked.
Right, pitting them against a godlike foe.
This Sentry!
Exactly. He says flat out, that didn't work for DC's Suicide Squad, and it's where Thunderbolts fails to stick the landing.
So even though he liked the actor playing the Sentry, the character's power level becomes the big structural problem for him.
That's precisely his argument. He circles back to the Sentry, saying the character feels like he is in the wrong film.
Why?
because that formidable threat he represents is just fundamentally at odds with the tone set at the beginning.
The tone set by those smarter, grounded action scenes.
Yeah, it creates a clash.
And this clash, according to Simpson, messes up the ending, the third act.
Pretty much. He describes this shift where suddenly, facing this massive threat, the solution becomes, well, all they needed was the power of friendship to save the day.
That old trope.
Yeah. And he feels like the movie hints at something darker initially. He uses this phrase, an unsuspecting gloom clouds the screen, like Marvel is teasing a step towards the dark side.
Right.
But Simpson sees it as more of a fake-out. He thinks the studio ultimately pulled back to keep things friendly for all ages.
Resulting in
what he calls a forced and rushed climax.
Ouch. So even with the good cast.
He feels the movie falls flat when it matters most, despite their efforts.
And he connects this film's issues to bigger things happening with the MCU.
He does. He even points to the credit sequence. Says it unintentionally pokes fun at the execution of the movie's ending.
How so?
By questioning if fans actually want this team pushed as the next big thing, given how he felt the movie ended. It's a sharp observation from him.
And that ties back to his earlier point about, was it content over media?
Yeah, that the MCU might be churning out content without always nailing the execution or the bigger narrative meaning. He felt Thunderbolts had hints of something new, but they just blend into the homogeneous stew of the MCU in the end.
Does he talk about launching the next generation of heroes? That's been a big discussion point for the MCU.
He touches on it. He notes the MCU seems to be struggling with that launch.
Does he think Thunderbolts was supposed to fix that?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
He doesn't think it was ever meant to carry that weight all by itself.
Okay.
However, he points to that end credit scene again, the one he says is slightly spoiled by the credits themselves.
Right, we see that sometimes.
And he feels that scene promotes the team so heavily that it actually overshadows the strengths the movie did have.
How does he describe the vibe of that scene?
Like a lighthearted nudge and a wink, Avengers assemble, framing them as the next big team up, despite his issues with the film itself.
So summing it all up then, Simpson's final verdict.
He calls it a decent comic book film elevated by a strong cast. So not terrible, acknowledges the good parts.
But there's a but, isn't there?
A big one, yeah. But one that fails to fill the hole Marvel has tried to fill since 2019, that post-Endgame gap.
And his final line in the review.
It's pretty damning from his perspective. He says the movie may kill some time between now and Fantastic Four, but will do little to keep you invested for Doomsday.
Yeah.
Whatever that big future event is.
Wow. Okay. So potential recognized, especially in the cast like Pugh and Russell and the initial setup.
Right. Enjoyed that first part, the grounded action.
But ultimately, for him, it fumbled. That mismatch with the villain, the Sentry, leading to an ending he found rushed, kind of cliche, and a fake out on anything darker.
Yeah, and feeling like it didn't quite move the needle for the larger MCU, despite the end credits hype. That's the core of Simpson's take.
That's a really clear breakdown of Thomas Simpson's perspective from that Moviescramble review. He definitely saw highs and lows.
And thinking about his broader points,
Yeah.
About the challenges the MCU faces, managing this huge continuity, bringing in new characters effectively, balancing tones.
It leads to a final thought, maybe, for you listening, drawing from Simpson's critique.
Given his perspective on these ongoing struggles, keeping longtime fans engaged while attracting new ones, making all the pieces fit.
What do you think is the biggest hurdle for a massive, long-running shared universe like the MCU to clear in its next chapter? How can they thread that needle between rewarding the dedicated viewers, the ones who did the homework, and making it accessible and exciting for newcomers, keeping it all feeling fresh?
Yeah, how do they balance that? Something to chew on.